Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 Women in Racing AGM, followed by a panel discussion. Just to let you know, this is being recorded, so we'll be sharing a link out for anyone who misses it or any colleagues that you want to forward the YouTube link onto afterwards. That's the main piece of housekeeping. All I'd encourage you to do throughout is to ask questions in the chat, particularly with the panel discussion and anything that comes up for you during the AGM. Please do feel free to put those in either the chat function or the Q&A. I think either one of those has an anonymous function if you'd prefer to keep your name anonymous. But yeah, we really hope that you're kind of up for sharing your experiences particularly during the panel discussion of your time working in racing, as well as hearing from our brilliant panel today. We are short of one panelist, very sadly. Tara Warren, BHA board member, who was due to join us, sadly has had a last-minute unavoidable diary clash. So she won't be joining us, but she promises us that she will be on a future webinar and be a part of the Women in Racing conversation that way. Lastly, before we get going, today's AGM marks 15 years of Women in Racing, which I think is a remarkable milestone for a voluntary organisation like ours. And I just want to take the opportunity to thank our current committee, who have been busy putting together today's AGM and also week in, week out, year round, creating the events, running the bursary program and the mentoring program, and keeping the network that is Women in Racing going and connecting you all as best they can and keeping it all on the road. So a big thank you to them. They are very appreciated and they are brilliant people fitting it around their full-time roles in racing and beyond in some cases. So thank you to those guys. Bear with me while I share my screen and we will get the AGM underway. Okay, so here's a quick run through of the agenda. Welcome, I've already done. Looking ahead and committee updates, followed by membership, social media, bursary, mentoring, events, finances and partnerships. And then closing remarks and racing home, of course, followed by our panel discussion, which will be hosted by Ali Vance. As many of you will be very familiar with, our year-round commitments to our members include events, minimum of 4 per year, a mixture of aims and objectives through those, networking, career development, etc. Mentoring aims to host at least 12 new partnerships per year. Bursary, we aim to raise at least 2,000 a year. Membership, grow our membership by at least 10% each year. And of course, awareness, which our research, our Racing Home program feeds into, and that we're kind of feeding into on a regular basis around the female agenda in our sport, which we're proud to do. Committee updates. So it's been a busy year for committee changes, many due to people getting exciting opportunities abroad or in other sports in some cases, and personal situations changing. But we're so grateful to all of these people who have stepped down nonetheless. Ash, Faye, Flora, Blaheen, Dom, Sophie and Ashley. But really pleased to have the following new appointments. Grace, who's looking after social media for us. Cheryl, who looks after our mentoring program and much more. Kim, who has a secretariat role to the committee, who we function amazingly much better with Kim than without. Lucy, who looks at policy and process improvement for us, and Steph, who runs our bursary, which recently relaunched, which you'll hear more about shortly. Since year end, so our year end is actually May, Molly Day has joined, and Juliet Frost, and Emma Stevenson is shortly due to step down. Molly is also actually due to step down, having had only a couple of months in the role due to an amazing new job opportunity that she's got in the US. So congratulations to Molly. Thanks for the short time with us, but hopefully she'll be back and supporting women in racing at some point in the future. For anyone that wants to find out more about the committee, just have a look on the About page on our website, and you'll find all the bios, current roles, what the roles are on the committee, etc. So this is the current full list. Yeah, me, Emma, Grace, Cheryl, Molly, Juliet, Lucy, Kim, Sally, and Steph. So big thank you to that team who, yeah, been a busy year. So membership. Emma,
yes.
are you?
Yes, thank you very much, Lucy. If we can just go on to the next slide. I'm very excited to be given the opportunity to briefly discuss the benefits of being a Women in Racing member. Our organisation is more than just a network. It's a supportive community that aims to empower women within the industry. Membership provides a gateway of access to many different areas, and by connecting with fellow members at events, we look to share experiences, advice, and resources, which can in turn open doors to potential new career prospects and collaborations. We offer the exclusive and unique mentoring and bursary program, which I'm not going to go into, as Cheryl and Steph will go into further detail later. But being part of Women in Racing fosters a sense of belonging and camaraderie among women in the exciting industry. And I would encourage you all to take full advantage of what the membership has to offer. The current membership is £25 per year, with the concession membership being £15, which is available to anybody that is under 24 or working in a racing charity. So please do get in touch if you would like to receive a discount code. Thank you, Lucy.
On to Cheryl.
Hi, thanks, Lucy and Emma. Hi, I'm Cheryl. I'm the mentoring lead for Women in Racing. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of what the mentoring programme is about and what we've been doing over the last year. So have the next slide, please. So for those of you that are not familiar with it, the mentoring programme is one of the cornerstones of the Women in Racing project. It's the only official mentoring programme within racing, and it's designed to connect women within the industry who wish to pass on their experience and those that are looking to be mentored. We've got mentors based up and down the country in all aspects of the racing industry, from bloodstock to stable staff to racing yards to administration, management roles, all sorts. So there is something for everyone. And the key objective is that we provide our members with support that is tailored to their requirements, that can encourage them, guide them through their careers, and also establish contacts for them so that we can enable them to reach their goals within the racing industry. Next slide, please. So since its inception 15 years ago, we have supported more than 125 mentoring partnerships. We currently have 44 different mentors based across the country and 20 currently active partnerships. As I mentioned, we have a wide cross-section of mentors from different organisations, and just some of those are listed on the screen there. Next slide, please. This is a recent quote from a lady that has been through a mentoring partnership. As you can see, the feedback has been incredibly positive, and she's also aware that should she feel the need to re-establish her partnership, she can, or if she wishes to use a different mentor to help her find new aspects for her career guidance, that is something that is open to everyone as well. It's not a question of one partnership per member. It's as many partnerships as you need to get what it is that you need to help your career. Next slide. We have some news updates for the mentoring program. We have some new initiatives that are coming forward into 2025. So the first one is one that we've christened Mentors for Mums, which is going to be a group of mentors established specifically to advise women in the racing industry throughout their motherhood journey. So whether you are contemplating starting a family, if you are already pregnant, if you are waiting to return to work after having a child, or you have children and you want to talk to somebody about the return to work and juggling childcare, school, that kind of thing, we're going to have a group of mentors who are dedicated to be able to talk you through that, give you, again, signpost support that you can access and give you guidance, or just a friendly ear to talk about all the things that we know come along with parenthood. And the other piece of news is that Women in Racing have been working with BHA on a formal qualification for mentoring. It's going to be something available across the industry, but it will be open to our mentors, and it will enable them to get a formal qualification in the mentoring field that is personal development for themselves, as well as being able to give our mentees the confidence in the mentoring that they are receiving. And hopefully we'll be able to announce more about that in the coming months. Next slide. So really, just for me to say, to conclude, please join the programme. It's something that's available to every Women in Racing member. For £25 or £15 a year, you have access to all these amazing women who are ready and waiting to give their time and their experience to you. So please, I do really encourage you to take advantage of it. If you've got any questions about mentoring, you can pop them in the chat, or you can email me on mentoring@womeninracing.co.uk, and I'll very happily get back to you. Thank you, Lucy.
Over to Steph.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to have a quick talk through our bursary updates. As Lucy's kindly mentioned, we have recently relaunched this, so I hope to go through some of that with you. So the bursary scheme offers an individual award of up to £2,000, and any paid members of Women in Racing are eligible to apply for this. The committee and membership raise money to fund the bursary, and we aim to approve 2 applications a year. To date, we have supported 16 people in their professional growth and development. We have recently relaunched the bursary to provide clearer objectives and making it easier to understand and apply. We have also introduced 2 application windows, from the 1st of May to the 30th of June and the 1st of November to the 31st of December, in the hope that this aligns with most course start dates. However, we do consider all applications on a case-by-case basis and would encourage applications at other times if these windows don't fit your timeline. For more information on the bursary and its relaunch, please scan the QR code on the page. You're ahead of me with the slides. Thank you, Lucy. This poster clearly highlights each step of the application process and what is required of the applicant, making the process clearer and easier. It is now even easier to apply for the bursary, as you can access the form by scanning the QR code on this page or on any of our bursary social media posts. Next slide, please. The bursary scheme is intended to support the growth and development of women's careers in racing. Previous awards have been used for a variety of courses, development, equipment, research, and expenses, including media and filming courses, HGV license training, television presenter courses, industry research, leadership training, IT equipment for higher education, travel expenses, and a counselling course. We ask all of our applicants if they would be happy to share their experiences, and we are currently working on some past stories to share on our website and social media platforms. Next slide, please. Thank you. And if you or someone you know could benefit from the bursary scheme and wants more information on what is available and how to apply, please visit the bursary page on our website or our social media platforms. Alternatively, you can contact us with any questions through the Contact Us page, or you can email me directly on my Women in Racing email, which can also be found on the Contact Us page. Thank you.
Back to Cheryl.
Back to me again. Right. Just talk you through the events that we've hosted during 2024 and what we've got planned for 2025. So next slide, please. So first of all, in March, we held a webinar for International Women's Day on mentoring, and we had a number of panelists talking, discussing the mentoring process and what it involved and how everyone can benefit from it. And we also had the Women Pushing Boundaries webinar as well, which featured Safi Osborne, Dr. Eleanor Bowden, Eileen Hart, and Dr. Kate, who's also on the panel today. Next slide. In August, we hosted a visit to Dallenhall Stud, kindly hosted by Godolphin. We had more than 40 members visit the stud on a beautiful day. We were able to view some of the stallions out in their paddocks, had a tour of the stallion yard. And again, after a lunch provided by Godolphin, we had a discussion on mentoring and women's experiences within the racing industry. We had a fantastic panel featuring Baroness Dido Harding, the new senior steward of the Jockey Club, Dawn Laidlaw from Godolphin, Rachel Flynn, Sarah Guest, Naomi Meller, and Simone Sear. And we're extremely grateful, obviously, to Godolphin for hosting us on the day. And I believe we also have a short video that Godolphin put on their own social media that we can play for you now.
Bear with me while I just screen share the video.
Thank you, Lucy. So other events that we had during 2024, sorry, I went the slides. Okay, go next. There we go. So in September, we yet again hosted our Burley meetup, again in partnership with Pole Roger. There were 20 attendees and involved a course walk with event rider Nikki Hill, and afterwards a very nice Pole Roger tasting session with the team there. Next slide. And more recently, we had our very popular Sea Sports media training event. The feedback from the day has been absolutely fantastic. It was led by Ed Chamberlain, Richard Hoyles, Ella McNeil, and Rosie Tapner, and we had 18 attendees for a half day of media training, which included group and one-to-one work. As I said, it was incredibly popular. The feedback has been fantastic, and we really hope that the people that attended can make great use of the day. Next slide. So looking forward to what we've got coming up. Our next event on the 18th of November is an introduction to women in racing that is going to be at Jack Berry House in Malton. You can find out more and book onto that now via the events page on our website. We're also looking to host a Christmas event at Tattersalls during December sales. And moving forward into 2025, we're hoping to host a CV writing workshop during January, as I know it's something that we've had feedback on that members feel will be beneficial. And we will have an International Women's Day webinar again in March. During the summer, Godolphin have kindly offered to host us again at their rehoming and retraining centre in Newmarket. And we'll also be hosting an event at Haydock Park Racecourse. And again in September, hopefully we will have the Burley Horse Trials meetup and another media training event. Thank you very much.
Over to Sally.
Hello, I'm Sally Lyons. I am co-treasurer, but today I'll also be doing the social reach part of the presentation. So our stats are as follows. Facebook, we have 2.6 thousand followers. On Instagram, we have 2,000 followers, which has increased by 200 followers in the last 6 months. 17,000 accounts reached in the last 3 months, and posts reached around 6,000 views. The next steps, we will increase volume of posts. We are going to try and reach a younger audience, as I'll talk about in the next slide, and celebrate achievements of women in racing. So looking ahead, we're going to be doing some Instagram takeovers. So we will be showcasing the different jobs that women have in the industry. If anyone's interested, do get in touch, and we will be approaching a few people in the coming months. There'll be more frequent posting, and we'll be collaborating with Racing Home, which Lucy will tell you a bit more about later on. As you can see from the graph, we have a general audience between 25 and 45 years old. So we're looking to expand this and generate content for a wider audience and a younger audience. Next slide. Cheryl is going to bring you through LinkedIn.
Okay, back again. So just to bring you up to date on our LinkedIn page and how that's working. So it's currently our fastest growing platform. In the last 12 months, our followers have grown by 136% to over 1,200, which is fantastic. Our posts have generated more than 61,000 impressions, and we've had over 1,400 views in the last month with 637 unique visitors. If you're not already following us on LinkedIn or any of our social media channels, do make sure that you give us a follow. We try and post as much information about upcoming events on there as we can, and it's also a great way of getting in touch with us. Thank you.
So onto the financial update. I'll keep it short and brief for everyone whose numbers aren't really their thing. So if we click to the summary. Memberships this year, we had £2,322 compared with last year, which was 1,565. Our main partnerships are with the Racing Foundation grant, which was 83,240. A major cost this year was our Racing Home project of 80,958, funded by the grant from the Racing Foundation and also from Kindred. The total bursary amount awarded this year was £2,000. So in total, the Women in Racing funds stand at 15,401, and the Racing Home funds stand at 2,281 at the end of the financial year. Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks, Sally. And just to add to that, we relaunched our membership system. You might have noticed something slightly different about when you're becoming a member or renewing your memberships, that we updated our system. So looking back at the memberships figure, hopefully, because our last system was failing us dismally towards the end. So hopefully it's much easier to manage your memberships on an ongoing basis, but always feedback is welcome throughout. That's not the only reason the memberships have gone up. Hopefully it's because we're spreading the word and hosting some engaging events as well. But yeah, it helps if it's easy to be a member, hopefully. Over to Molly, if Molly's.
Thank you. I managed to join after some technical issues, and it's entirely me and no one else. Welcome to the partnerships slide of the AGM. I obviously have only been with Women in Racing for a very short time due to heading off to the States for a new opportunity. But we've got so many brilliant ways to become partners of Women in Racing, whether that is to look at bespoke packages that suit your company and your needs, or whether in fact that might be a bespoke event that suits a company that you're with. So if you are currently employed by, well, most of you will be employed by somebody within the racing industry, and you think that your employer could maybe get involved with looking at how to have more women in racing as members, then get in touch. We can offer 1-year terms up to 3-year terms. They can be linked, as I said, to just an event or memberships for the whole business. Our current partners are with Arena Racing and the All in Diversity group, and we're just in the process of setting up with the Jockey Club as well, which is really exciting. This is an amazing group of people, and to be able to grow this and make it bigger and better is absolutely wonderful. And I think everybody has a responsibility to try and help that, because the more that we can grow as an organisation, the more that we can help people to take that next step within their racing career. Yes, thank you, Lucy.
Thanks, Molly. So moving on to racing home, and we're doing okay for time, which means I've got plenty of time to kind of explain a little bit more about what racing home is. I've also got a video to show you. But the history of racing home is, it started back in 2020 with a symposium where people from across the industry gathered together for the first time to talk about parenthood, not just motherhood, parenthood as a whole, and what it's like to raise a family in the racing industry. And from that, I think it was pretty clear that not only was it a slightly taboo subject, not really talked about. Some people didn't really feel comfortable revealing that they even had a family, in case it impacted on their career somehow. But also that there was a lack of data, lack of research there. So with support from the Racing Foundation and Kindred shortly after, we put together a research project led by Kate Clayton Hathaway from Oxford Brookes, who is on today's panel, as mentioned. And that enabled us to actually find out what the problems were and what the solutions might be to those. So there were kind of workshops and focus groups around nationwide. Well, they started to be nationwide, and then they had to go on to Zoom because COVID hit at that point. But that gave us a really rich amount of data to gather that picture of kind of what's going on in the industry, and for people individually and collectively across various different roles, horse facing, office based, etc. So that piece of research can be found on the Racing Home website and the Women in Racing website under the resources pages. So do feel free. It's a user-friendly, readable, digestible document, and is worth a look just to see some of those quotes and sound bites from people about what their experiences have been. So from that, there were some really good recommendations that came out, and the implementation plan, led by Simply Racing and their brilliant team, has been running ever since. And we're actually about to go into phase 3 of that, which we're extremely grateful to the Racing Foundation for supporting us. We've recently confirmed further funding to enable that to happen. So that runs across a wide range of pillars. But before I kind of launch into that, I'm going to show you the Racing Home video, because it does more than I can say in that way. So bear with me again while I switch screen sharing over to the video, which I might just have to switch videos. Okay.
My experience of having children in the industry would be a mixed experience, if I'm brutally honest. There have been many highs, but there's also been an ongoing low in the background of how hard it's been to maintain a somewhat successful career in the industry whilst having 2 small children.
The biggest challenge is probably the mum guilt that you put on yourself, taking time away from the children, not quite capturing their first steps. I remember feeling very guilty about that. It was very important for me to have that sense that I could still have my old life to a certain extent and get back onto a horse, and I hadn't completely lost it.
I think we're all clear now what the barriers are facing women returning to work in the racing industry. So now is the time to put some solutions in place, and that's exactly what the Racing Home project is doing. The ambassadors are key to the success of the project. They have an in-depth knowledge of the racing industry and years of experience between them. They're talking to employers, including trainers. They're talking to employees, including racing staff. And they're talking to a self-employed community, so that everyone has access to the Racing Home portal, to the information and the knowledge that is accessible from Racing Home.
So I am an ambassador, and I'm also the national chaplain to the horse racing industry. Part of that role is a pastoral care role. Staff have issues all the time. That could be work issues, it could be home issues, and I'm probably one of the first port of calls for the staff. I'm an ear to listen, hopefully words of guidance.
I'd like to achieve the sense of community for those new mothers that are looking to return to work, perhaps even the fathers that are looking for a little bit of time off to be with their newborn baby and then come back into work. That there's people out there that they can talk to, get advice from.
There are trainers out there that are working really hard, and I know I've had conversations with trainers who've said, send ladies to me who want to come in at 9 o'clock when they've done the school run, because I can accommodate them. They can ride out third slot, fourth slot, pull mains, clip, do all the jobs that we don't have time for. So in my mind, they're conversations that we are starting to have that we never would have had before Racing Home existed. So that's a huge positive. But there is still a long way to go with the culture shift that needs to happen to accommodate these women.
We really have to look at this from the beginning, which is over 70% of the racing school intakes at the moment are female. It's really important that that female workforce is looked after from the very beginning, from their very first job, right through to retirement.
You know, there are plenty of us that have been in these situations, and I think it's up to us to share our experience with those new parents and show how it can be done.
I suppose my dream for the programme would be that we become an industry name, that people will just talk to one another and someone will say, oh, well, you know, I'm not sure how this is going to play for me because I'm pregnant, and people will say, well, yeah, but speak to Racing Home.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a flavour of the programme. That features our grassroots ambassadors. So they are a brilliant kind of on-the-ground network of women, well, men and women working across the sport, who are available in kind of yard environments, as well as remotely to support anyone kind of taking those steps into parenthood. So the grassroots ambassadors is part of it, but we also have a podcast series, which has, I talked about earlier, you know, there was a taboo around parenthood. So there have been some really fascinating and insightful conversations with various kind of people across the sport with lots of different life experiences. I'll share my screen again so you can see just some of those podcast conversations. It's going to keep up with me. There we go. There's some of the podcast conversations. So that's some of the kind of communications, and you'll see through our social media feeds all the different things that we're sharing. At the moment, a pertinent one is the changes in the Equality Act and around sexual harassment and how that is viewed for employers and employees, legally speaking. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye on the news page in particular of the Racing Home website, just to make sure that you're up to speed with, you know, what's changing in that space. There's a real mixture of really interesting content on there. And also the Racing Home Hub is all about ensuring that there's a place. So this was one of the things that was identified, is that there was nowhere for the industry, employers, self-employed people and employees to find out what their rights and entitlements were around parenting. So you'll see all of those policies, all of those, we have legal support ongoing, in fact, to keep those up to date and to make sure that there is somewhere that you can find the advice that you need. at the time that you need it, and that it's easily accessible. So do go on and just have a look around the Racing Home website, regardless of kind of whether you're an employer, an employee, or self-employed, because there is something on there to support you as part of that. So so that covers a bit of Racing Home. There's a huge amount to it, including the Return to Riding Rehabilitation Programme, which started as a pilot and is still, you know, we learn as we go. It's managed again by the Simply Racing team, who manage the project, the Racing Home project on our behalf, and that involves supporting women back to riding roles, in particular, having had a baby. So there are physio sessions that are available. It's completely free to access, and started off being available at the Injured Jockeys Fund rehab centres, but is now extended beyond that if those centres are too difficult for people to get to. So it is sort of physical support through those physio sessions, but also psychological and emotional support, and is just there as a support system. As you can imagine, the core strength required to get back on horses postpartum is significant. So that is in place to ensure that women are feeling confident, safe, and strong enough to get back on board and return to their riding roles, which most of them have done after that programme finishes. So we're really pleased that by the end of this year, 40 industry participants will have gone through that programme. So that's a really, really exciting thing. So I'd say watch this space on Racing Home, certainly, because the momentum is growing day in, day out for that programme. And again, thank you to our funders, the Racing Foundation and Kindred, for supporting us on this journey, because it doesn't just happen. And finally, just to mention before I hand over, I know we've got a few questions in the chat, so I'll pick those up, but I'll just talk to you about a new initiative that we've launched called Racing Forward. So you may have seen us putting the news out on our emails and on our social media about Racing Forward. It is a really exciting collaboration between British Sailing and an organisation called More Than Equal, which they work in Formula One, and their aim is to sort of support the first female Formula One driver. So all kind of female organisations working on the female agenda in their sports, but all three of those sports are also where women and men technically compete on equal terms. So there's a lot in common in terms of the workplace environment that those kind of sports are having, and the safety and the psychological barriers that might be being faced by those participants in those sports, whether it's relating to equipment or just ensuring that women can actually compete on a level playing field in each of them. So it's a research group. Kate is representing us, as are the Simply Racing team, and then we're working with researchers in each of the other two sports. It's in very early stages. We're actually seeking funding and working on exactly what the project will look like, and we're about to kind of move into the stakeholder engagement phase as well, to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all three sports. But I hope you can kind of see from what I've explained that there's a huge opportunity there to look beyond our own sport and to boost the generally in society severely lacking level of research when it comes to women. So that one's one to watch, and further updates will come along in due course. If you haven't joined our email list, I'd suggest doing that. It's on our website. And yeah, I would really recommend doing that so that you're up to speed with everything and you don't miss our new projects. So questions here. Let me just open the Q&A. So I think the team have been answering some of them as we go. The one that has popped up in the top of my chat here is, has Women in Racing considered setting up a WhatsApp group for members similar to the Women's Sport Collective? Could be another good way of communicating with each other, networking, sharing jobs, information, etc. That is a great idea. Thanks, Rose, for that. Let us know if that is something that you'd be keen to join, because obviously it's up to you. I'm also a member of the Women's Sport Collective WhatsApp groups, and it's just fascinating to see other women working across other roles in sport. And so do join that as well. You can join that through the Women's Sport Collective website or LinkedIn or both. But yeah, if you're interested in a WhatsApp group for women in racing, then let us know and we'll make sure we set that up. Thanks for that, Rose. Another question is, could you mention a little more about Kindred? So Kindred and Unibet are a betting company based in Wimbledon, and they are focusing primarily on racing, but other sports as well. And Ed Nicholson is the contact that we work with at Kindred, who is a big racing fan, has been involved in setting up the jump season opener at Chepstow, and they have some sponsorships at Cheltenham and elsewhere as well. They are pioneering a sports sponsorship model that is kind of more CSR focused. So beyond just race sponsorship, they want to know that the money that they're investing back into racing through these partnerships is doing good for racing's people, or just doing good in any area of the sport where they work. They have a similar approach in, I think it's football, where they're funding mental health support through their club sponsorship model. So we've been really pleased to work with Kindred on a slightly lower level in terms of investment to what the Racing Foundation have put in. But equally, it's great to have their support. We've used their box at Kempton when we've wanted to launch the Racing Home event, the Racing Home program initially, and they kind of will communicate all of our activity within Kindred and on their social media channels as well. So it's really great to have such a keen supporter and to have that positive and proactive connection with a betting company. So we are very grateful to be working with them. And I'd probably say that for any of our programs, there's still, the door is open for sponsors and partners, because yeah, as I said earlier, these programs don't just happen. They require funding, although the Women in Racing Committee and organisation is totally voluntary and non-profit, but the programs that require real stakeholder engagement, real investment in terms of time and resources to get the implementations of our research off the ground, that requires partners, supporters, investors as well. So please don't be shy if you think that you can contribute to any of our programs. So I think we are almost perfect timing to hand over, which I did not expect. I will just close because it's the 15th AGM. I just wanted to share a slide from Sally Rowley-Williams, who is the founder of Women in Racing. Just make sure that, oh, there we are. So I'll read it because I'm aware it's a lot of text, but the inspiration to found Women in Racing was a vision to promote more women in leading positions and raise the profile of women across the entire industry in all roles. Additionally, it was important for Women in Racing to raise gender diversity as a key component in developing British horse racing, and for Women in Racing to be its go-to centre of expertise. Having consulted with senior figures in our sport, both men and women, we launched in 2009 with a talented and hardworking team of women forming our first committee. She said, "I'm so proud of the women in racing track record, and you can see here today some shining examples of our successes. We established a mentoring program to support our membership. Quite a few of the committee and a lot of senior women in the sport, just to add, have been through that mentoring program. We established a bursary, and again, senior leadership, women in senior leadership roles have been beneficiaries of that from the very start. So we're still putting back in the industry today. And then the final one is with grant and sponsorship funds, we were able to undertake and publish a first ever study of gender diversity in racing. Working with Professor Simonetta Manfredi and Dr. Kate Clayton-Hathaway, it encouraged the BHA to undertake inaugural efforts to promote diversity. This groundbreaking report absolutely established women in racing as industry leading for gender diversity and created a productive link that continues today between Oxford Brookes and women in racing. God, I don't think I've ever said women in racing so many times in one paragraph. Sorry, everyone. Along the way, countless friendships and business relationships have flourished, and we can all be proud of what women in racing has accomplished over these 15 years. Here's to many future successes and an ongoing legacy to British horse racing. So thanks, Sally, for that. And on that note, I'm pleased to hand over to Ali, who I've seen is here, so I'm hoping all her tech's working okay.
Yeah, hi guys. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah, welcome to the panel discussion. Thank you very much, Lucy, for guiding everyone through that AGM. And just to echo, I guess, Sally's words, what women in racing has achieved over the last 15 years, and to see so many participants. I think I just checked as sort of almost 60 attendees listening into this panel discussion. So just a couple of housekeeping bits and bobs. This is going to be recorded, as was the AGM. So just bear that one in mind. If you have any questions for today's panel, please again put them in the question and answers in the chat is probably the best way to do it, and I'll try and introduce those questions as we're going on. But today's panel is on equal terms, women in racing through time, an interactive exploration of the roles of women in British horse racing, charting successes, changes over time, and opportunities for improvement. Now, I think we've got Lyndon Roberts and Kate Clayton-Hathaway joined on. So if you'd like to put your videos up, guys. There we go, there's Kate and Lyndon. And I believe we might be waiting for Ali Donnelly. Am I right? Hi, Lyndon. Hi, Kate. Well, we will just wait. Hi, we'll wait for oh, there's Ali. Ali, you're signed in under Lyndon, yes?
Yes, sorry about that. I'll rename it.
It's from the link that I probably sent you. I don't know what it was. But anyway, we've got all of our panelists, which is great. So I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves in just a moment. But first, Lucy, you've got a slide just to chart the successes of women in racing and just, I guess, give us a little bit more of a perspective on where we've come from in what is a relatively short time.
Yes, bear with me. One more screen.
No worries. I will fill in the gap. Yeah, I'm Ali Van, and I've been working in sports broadcasting for about 10, 12 years, and primarily in racing, but I have done quite a lot of other sports, but now more recently, pretty much all racing. So as you can see, first female granted a permit was back in 1886, but I believe that even in those days, it was sort of fairly unofficial that you couldn't really train on level playing field with men. The first female jockey to win a race under rules was not till 1967, which is quite remarkable. You couldn't become a jockey club member until the 70s. You can see there. And then we've got a whole host of great successes in the late 70s and 80s. As we know, Jenny Pittman, Gay Kellaway, Kirkhead Head Marek were pioneers in sort of females doing so well in racing. We've got our first Clark, wasn't until 1988. And then moving on to more recently, first female jockey to ride in the Derby was not until 1996, which is quite remarkable. And the first flat Group 1 winner, Hayley Turner. And you can see her name cropping up an awful lot, the likes of her, Bryony Frost, Julie Harrington, Rachel Blackmore, Holly Doyle, all done so well in recent years. So those are the kind of landmarks or milestones of women in racing. So with that as your sort of backdrop, we're now going to discuss really how females' roles in racing has changed over the time, but more focus on how we can look at it from other sports perspectives, which is hopefully where Lyndon and Ali can play more into, and what more can be done, because we want to see more females breaking through at the top ranks. So if I could ask each of the panelists just to introduce yourselves. Everyone has probably got or seen a bit of a crib sheet on you. We've seen some sort of bios, but if you could just introduce yourselves, tell us what you're doing at the moment, but then really tell us your experience or link to racing, if there is one. So Kate, I'll start with you because everyone's going to be fairly familiar with your work within racing.
Great. Good afternoon. It is afternoon, isn't it? Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. I was just looking on that list of achievements and realised that the year I first became involved in racing was the year that Lizzie Kelly won the Group 1 as jump jockey prize race.
Grade 1, yeah, first grade 1, yeah.
So first grade 1. And that was the year that actually Sally Rowley Williams had come to us at Brooks and talked about the first piece of work that we did. So that was my introduction to kind of research within horse racing. So I then and now work for Oxford Brookes University in the business school, and it was very much the first piece of work I got involved with was very much looking at some leadership and career progression, and we did a survey, we did lots of interviews, and we came up with the initial report that kind of gave the impetus to really start looking at diversity within the horse racing as a whole. So I've been involved since then certainly with the second piece of work, which I'll maybe talk about a little bit as a result of any questions I get asked. But the racing homework came out of that first piece of work, and I've been involved with the research. I've been involved with helping to develop the websites for Racing Home, working with the Simply Racing team, and continue to do so. And I'm excited about phase 3, and I'll say a little bit more about what's going to come out of phase 3 as we go on with the discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kate. Okay, Lyndon.
Hi everyone. I'm Lyndon. For those who don't know me, I was covering Rose's role as Head of Diversity Inclusion at the BHA from about 12 months ago. I'm now a consultant with the FIA, so Global Motorsport governing body, and over the last sort of 12 years or so, I've worked in various D&I roles across professional clubs, primarily in football and rugby, but also with lots of governing bodies, namely England Netball, British Triathlon Federation, and also Sport England and UK Sport. So hopefully that will cover off the sort of wider sports perspective that you were hoping to cover, Ali.
Brilliant, lovely, thank you. And Ali?
Hi all, sorry about my fake name on the screen. At least we're both called Ali. My name's Ali Donnelly. So I'm not from the sport racing at all, but I'll tell you about the connection in a second. I run an organisation called More Than Equal, so we are looking to help sort of do maybe what you've done ahead of us in your mixed gender sport, and have women competing more consistently at the very top of motorsport in Formula 1. My background, a bit like Lyndon, actually, I've worked in various sports, rugby and at Sport England, largely marketing, comms and innovation roles, but I've worked in some big women and girls campaigns like This Girl Can, which came out of my team at Sport England, which was really interesting. And the connection with racing is, obviously there aren't that many mixed gender sports in the world. And so a while back, I reached out to Lucy to say, there must be synergies between the barriers and opportunities that your athletes face and ours, and inevitably there were. And also because I'm involved in rugby, I run an organisation, it's a non-profit called Women of Union, which is actually modelled on women in racing, and we're quite new. So we're stealing all of your ideas. So yes, Lucy and I have also been chatting about that. So hopefully I can bring a perspective from those two sports into this discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ali. Yes, we're going to hear about the collaboration racing forward. Thank you very much. Cheryl Caves has just messaged me on direct messenger saying that for anyone who's interested, Karen Wiltshire, who was the first woman to ride a winner as a professional jockey, has just released a book titled No Place for a Girl. It's about her time in racing. So that could be an interesting read. But we're hoping that there's been a lot of progression since that time. Kate, I'll be interested on your thoughts, given your research and so much data collection within the industry, your impression on the progress of racing and possibly highlighting where you feel the issues are.
Okay, so I'll start with the second bit first. So my background actually is a sociologist in working in kind of structural, looking at structural barriers and the structures within organisations and within industries. The sort of issues that we really identified, I think you can find across most industries and most parts of most sectors, but we're particularly strong within horse racing. First of all, very masculine culture, which can create issues, because what we find is that this creates a kind of this idea that is an ideal worker who, if you kind of scrutinize it, is a man who can work all the hours that God sends and doesn't have any family or other ties. And this is something that resonates across all sorts of sectors, not just horse racing, but is particularly strong in horse racing. Other issues that we identified were around segregation. So we've been looking at, we're familiar with the idea of the glass ceiling, and one of the things that Sally had identified, and we managed to kind of really start to identify within the first piece of research that we did, was a kind of concentration of men in the more senior roles, in the sort of better paid and more kind of, if you like, sort of powerful roles, even though there are an awful lot of women coming through in the industry, incredibly talented women coming through in the industry. And also what we would call vertical segregation, which is actually, horizontal segregation rather, which we would call glass walls, with women being concentrated more in things like working with the charitable sector, and it being less easy to move within the industry. So of course, what that means is that there's less mobility, less possibility for sort of career progression. And what comes up against that is the sort of the rigid structures. So for women to be able to have any sort of family life is very difficult, because you've got these sort of rigid structures and these expectations that to be the perfect worker, you need to be able to do certain things, and that's give up all of your time. So these are things that happen across different sectors, but are very entrenched. One of the things that we really came up against, particularly when we started looking for the racing home and looking more at expectations around family life, were that this idea, oh, well, we've always done it this way. Very sort of solid structures, that ideas about times for shifts and who should do what and who should be where when they needed to be, etc. And a sort of a rigidity that had come through years of tradition, years of kind of things being passed down from generation to generation. Very, very solid, very strong ideas about the way that things should be done. So it really helps to do the sort of research that we've done, because we take a step back and see what the impact is on people. Since that first piece of work, just to answer the first part of your question, I think we've seen enormous progress. Somebody mentioned, I think it might have been Lucy in the last segment of her talk, about the taboos in the industry. And when we first started this about 10 years ago, this work, it was really taboo to even talk about having a family, or to talk about wanting something, to do something differently. And I've seen a lot of progress already in the opening up of conversations, and it being actually viable to want to have maybe a differently structured career, or to continue working once you've had children, or to move around in different ways that possibly weren't possible a while back.
Thank you, Kate. We'll return to you to find out perhaps some of the opportunities as we move forward, and where the areas could be that we can help support women in racing. But Lyndon, I think what Kate said, we've always done it this way, is an answer that has cropped up so many times when it's women in racing, or racing home projects have come up, or safeguarding even have come up. It's quite a common phrase within racing. Well, we've always done it this way. With your experience, Linda, from other sports and then coming into racing for a year in the D&I area, what are your sort of observations of racing compared to some of the other sports you've worked on?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say is racing isn't unique in that, actually. Every sport thinks they're special and unique, and they have their own traditions. So I think racing isn't necessarily unique in that sense. All sports have those things. And you look at sports like tennis, and Wimbledon is a very traditional event. You look at a football and the FA Cup final. There are lots of traditions that go along with those high-profile events. So there is that absolutely exists in other sports too. And I think the other sports have managed to chip away at that in terms of gender equality over the last couple of years. And there's been some really positive things that have happened during my time at Welsh Rugby. They work with Vodafone, for example, on a period tracking and concussion app, specifically for women's the women's national team and pathways. In addition to looking more broadly at more traditional sports, say like cricket, who have made sweeping changes to their women and girls pathway over the last couple of years, looking at things like gender equal pay as a very sort of big headline change that the sport has been able to introduce. So it shows that it is possible in traditional sports. Those changes can happen, assuming that you've got everyone pointing in the same direction. And I think that's one of the challenges that racing faces, where it is different to other sports, in that there are so many stakeholders and organisations that all need to collaborate to get even just a small thing over the line. I think that's probably one of the things that the Industry People Board and the Industry People Strategy over the next few years will help and support with, in aligning those priorities across the racing industry.
With your year at the BHA, what action plans or what work are you proud of that you have done in the last 12 months? I know you were sort of on the back end of the PhD research that came out of where did all the girls go? But there, I know that with that quite stark PhD research and results, and I'm sure most of the listeners have read some of the quotes that people have given in that research. What kind of, without having to reflect and look backward at that, but in what ways have we moved forward in the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, and I think that action plan is a significant shift. I think some of what was known or uncovered in the research was not new to people who have been in and around the industry for a long time. And there have been various reports and papers that have been written that touched upon retention of women in the industry, and some of the reasons for that have been known for 10 years or more, formally written down. But I think the difference now is that having that action plan and a direction of travel, which will take time, but what that acknowledges is it takes away that, dare I say, excuse that sometimes can be leveraged that says it's a societal problem. Well, actually now this takes ownership of some of those challenges that the industry faces around culture and behaviour, and ensures that the industry has to collectively move into the 21st century with that action plan, whether that's around education, awareness, whether it's around some of the regulatory activity or safeguarding and human welfare activity that the safeguarding team will be working on in their strategy over the next few years. I think that will be, that's a step change, I suppose, from where the industry was 3-4 years ago when that research was first presented, to it being published last year and having a sort of clear direction for the industry to raise those standards.
And while we're on it, the change of the law, the sexual harassment, can you remind on the new law and how that might affect or have a knock-on effect within the racing industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So this comes into effect on Saturday. So the Worker Protection Amendment to the Equality Act, comes into law on the 26th. of October, which essentially places the responsibility and a preventative duty on employers to safeguard their employees from sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. And the Equality and Human Rights Commission a couple of weeks ago published a comprehensive document, which is about 80 pages, but they've actually published 8 recommendations for employers to focus on to help put that preventative duty into action within their workplaces. So if there are employers on the call or on the webinar that think, I actually haven't done anything about this, don't worry, because it's not the end of the world, but that duty comes into effect. So that those proactive steps need to start from Saturday, essentially.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Lyndon. Right, Ali, you have obviously huge experience within both rugby and Formula One. Tell us about those roles that you've had with those sports and developing equality with them.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that they have in common with racing is that they are very male-dominated sports, both in terms of kind of participant base, but also the people running those sports are largely male, though rugby is starting to see some good sort of gender equity at the top of the sport, CEOs and so on. And yeah, look, I think my experience of both. I played rugby. I'm not a motorsport. I'm not a very good driver, actually. Full stop. So I understand the kind of the pathways and how you navigate through that sport. And my roles have largely been in sort of helping to grow the participant base. And at More Than Equal, what we're actually doing is we're taking a piece of research that we did last year to understand the barriers that have stopped women from getting into F1. We haven't had a female race in F1 for almost 50 years, but there used to be women racing at that level. And so we took a very kind of long, hard strategic look at what had happened since, and we found a whole range of barriers, which will be very, very familiar to those of you who are racing in your sport, around attitudes and stereotypes and cost and so on. But one of them was about the lack of kind of training and programs and tactical coaching for designed for women. So I think one of the really interesting things for me moving into motorsport and talking to Lucy and the team there is that it's hard for any woman, when you start playing a sport and you start climbing the ladder, your experience as a woman and as a girl, though this is changing for the better, and Lyndon will know this, is to navigate a system that wasn't really built for you in the first place. So you're always sort of retrofitting a little bit and you're making trade-offs. And sometimes as you climb the ranks, those trade-offs are performance related. And so when we did some research with female racing drivers, they said, the way in which I am training to build up my neck strength, which you need as a female driver because the G-force that's pushing against the car is significant, or when I'm training in a certain way to be able to kind of navigate the car, I'm actually doing the training program that was designed for male physiology. So we are starting to see like really positive changes in that respect. And these are very sort of simple things. I think if sport likes to talk about sort of marginal gains and all these things, and we sort of say to motorsport, what is a marginal gain if it's not actually training the driver you have in front of you properly? So I think my experience in those sports has just been, one, there's been a lot of progress in the last 8 to 10 years in particular for women's rugby, but we're still quite a way behind when it comes to research and gender sports science to really help female athletes to kind of maximize their performance, whether that's in the car, on the rugby field. And Lyndon, you touched on some of the work the WRU did around menstrual tracking, which is laudable, but also, I mean, women have periods, so we really should have been doing that work for 20, 30, 40 years. So I think we're playing catch up in all of these sports, but in the mixed gender sports space, yours being one, we're still quite behind, and I think that's for obvious reasons, but there's a way to go, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, you touched on menstrual tracking. I mean, the female jockeys all still wear white breeches. I know that the tennis players have made a point of not having to wear whites when female players having to wear whites, and there are a few things like that, yes, that when you touch upon. I think what's interesting, Ali, if I told you that 70% of the intake into the racing schools is women, and then you look at the other end and you've got obviously some hugely talented jockeys, but it's the dropout and it's the barriers with that. When you were asked to come onto this panel, I'm sure you have your own opinions and observations of racing. I mean, from an outsider's point of view, what do you make of women's progression within horse racing?
Yeah, interesting, because not, as you said, Lyndon, as well, the experience you're having is not that dissimilar to other sports where the funnel sort of does this as you get towards the top. Same is true in motorsport, with the biggest barrier being cost and kind of culture. I don't know if that's the same for you, but I think those two things are very kind of significant blockers to going from, you know, a wider participant base to really breaking through at the top end. And I think understanding those is incredibly important, because if not, you know, how many more, you know, I'm Irish, right? So I use Rachel Blackmore as my example for everything. But how many more Rachel Blackmores will there be if we don't sort of understand what's happening, that's, you know, that's stopping the large number of female jockeys moving on up the ladder? So I think, you know, it's really about sort of surfacing those barriers in a way that doesn't feel too combative to the sport, if that makes sense. I mean, one of the challenges that you have when you are someone like me, say in my role, trying to point out to this massively male-dominated sport that there is a reason, there are several reasons why women aren't making it, and it's not because they're not able to drive fast enough. You know, you're able to drive around the track pretty fast, but there are some barriers. So I guess it's about the same for you. What are those blockers? And kind of advocating for those to be changed. And you touched on a piece of research we're looking to do with sailing and with horse racing around gender design bias. That's a barrier, definitely in motorsport. You know, I could talk about that for ages, but the way in which the cars are designed, they're designed for male physique. So yeah, I think it's interesting, but I don't think it's that surprising to hear that your base goes from this to this, because that's the experience of so many.
Ali, question, where do you think it's harder for sports where you are competing on a level playing field to make it more equal? Given, would you, as I know it's a complete opposite opinion of what you think it might be, that, so let's say for sports like rugby or football, where you are in individual teams, male teams, female teams, so they've created wonderful women's cricket tournaments, that they're brilliant rugby, Six Nations is on a par with the men. Where it comes to things like sailing and racing, there are no exceptions. And even Formula One, you competing with the men in the men's cars. Is it then, do you think, is that it? I don't want to say it's a bad thing, because it's brilliant and we should celebrate that we've got wonderful Group 1, Grade 1 winning female jockeys competing on a level playing field. But does it make it harder to address the equality?
100%. I think it's harder in mixed gender sports, partly because where's the incentive for the sport that is successful to make a change? And everything is seen as an adjustment for women, instead of being seen as actually it's about creating an equal base and recognizing that this thing wasn't really set up with women in mind. So I think it's harder. And I think from a kind of social perspective, I mean, if you think about, let's say rugby, you go and play rugby. Yes, it's male dominated, and the structures in the ecosystem around rugby can feel a bit oppressive to women at times. So getting better. But you still have your own space to play in, quite literally. So, you know, you might feel, oh God, so it feels very male dominant, doesn't really feel built for me, the equipment, the way in which the sport speaks. But then you go and play with your team and you're in a female sporting environment. And so you always have that sort of environment to retreat to, and you don't have that in a mixed gender sport. And so I do think it is much harder. And lastly, I think that often when we talk about women's sports, the mixed gender sports get left out. So people don't often invite motorsport in to be in the spaces where women's sport is having an advocacy moment or having an event or whatever it might be. And I see sometimes racing absent for that too. And so it's harder to build that sort of advocacy band of allies as well. But I have very strong views on this, as you can tell, so I'll stop there.
No, not at all. And I'm sure everyone listening has had direct experience of the issues and areas that need to be improved, but we're going to try and look forward and find some opportunities. And Kate, I know with your research, you probably have got a whole host of areas and opportunities where we can try and keep the progress going.
Absolutely. I think carrying on from Ali's point, the toughness of kind of women succeeding within what is essentially a masculine male space. That's the first thing we hope to do with the sort of research that we do, is to give people a voice, because there is a kind of there's in order for women to succeed, they need to be seen as honorary men, and that means not admitting to any weakness at all. So we find there's great difficulty in actually getting somebody to admit to a difficulty, because that's perceived then as a weakness, and you're not as good as the men. And of course, as Ali said, you know, this was set up for men in the first place. It's very difficult sometimes in terms of kit, in some, you know, the things you've said about breaches as well. So I think there is kind of there's this kind of silence, this kind of taboo, this kind of culture of fear, and I think the best thing we can do, and that research can do, is firstly to kind of give a voice, and to actually reveal and to speak out about what these issues are, and then the other kind of the big opportunity then, now once we understand what is needed, is then to provide the education and provide the support and provide the support networks. So for example, around, I mean, we've specifically done work around motherhood and parenthood in my racing home, and as long as the grassroots, as well as, sorry, the grassroots ambassadors that you were told about in the earlier segments, being there and available to answer questions and to give support and to kind of advocate on people's behalves. We've also provided free legal advice, a portal that people can go to when they're unsure as to their employment rights, both for employers and for employees, and some support for self-employed people as well. And one of the things we're particularly proud of that's going to be rolled out soon is education for those 70% that are coming in. There will actually be an education module teaching them what their rights will be, both around parental leave, maternal leave, and all of the other kind of employment rights that support these issues, you know, so give them support for these issues, and also an understanding of things like what risk assessments are kind of necessary, and what you're allowed to have, what your employer should be doing for you. So those sorts of equipment issues that Ali's talking about, we found that to be a big barrier for some people, because there's kit that just doesn't fit the women, and they have to wear the men's kit, and they have to change in certain places, and all of those sorts of things. So that sort of education and providing knowledge and giving a voice, I think, is one of the big opportunities that research can do, this sort of research.
And I did a little bit of work with safeguarding with the BHA, and what's really highlighted is there's not any other working industry, whether it be sport, like racing, where effectively children leaving the racing schools are going and moving away from home, living on the yard, surrounded by people who work on the yard. Whereas most young adults get to go home and have their own set of friends that they might be able to say, is this normal? My boss said I should be doing this. Or they can bounce things off their parents. Whereas in racing, a lot of young people move away from home very early from the racing schools and are then sort of just so immersed within racing. And that's one issue. And the other one is there is a huge hierarchy within racing that you know, if you want to achieve something, you are at the mercy of someone with a lot of power, whether that's going to go traveling with a horse to Dubai or get your first race ride. It's quite which then is just a fertile area, field for, you know, women to feel scale of females at the other end of your working life. So things like the menopause and flexible working support for when we do have, or when we have children, or when females have children, or males even have to support their children, and what work has been taking place with that.
You cut out for a little bit there, but were you specifically asking about sort of at the other, just sort of at the other end, or I mean?
Yeah, so we've sort of addressed the younger generations coming into racing, and then perhaps moving into taking maternity or paternity. But then when we are then looking at our older workforce, and we're trying to retain female workforce and support during menopause and or flexible working time.
Yes, sure. So I mean, flexible working is becoming a big issue. I mean, because it's something that's becoming normalized out in wider society. So it's no longer a big thing anymore. You actually have a right to ask for flexible working. I'm not involved in this yet, but I understand there's going to be a flexible working pilot of some kind going on in the industry, and it's something that we're fully behind in terms of being able to help women. So what we have is this kind of all the younger women coming in and a lot dropping out at a certain point, have to try and keep them in. Opportunities to work flexibly are one thing we would definitely recommend that employers and employees kind of get knowledgeable about what everybody's rights are. Lucy talked earlier about some of the other initiatives where we're helping women through maternity and return to work. But one of the sort of the big losses, if you like, in terms of the staff is female staff is those that do find they need to leave. Childcare being a big issue as well, but we could have a whole webinar of childcare. But that are forced to leave because they cannot manage both, but then struggle to come back into the workplace as returners. So one of the, well, we're actually going to be, we're trying to roll out and are starting to put together what we're calling a lived experience panel of women, and we've actually had people approach us about this and say, let's talk about this, about both perimenopause, which can start affecting women in their 30s and 40s, but also menopause, in terms of understanding the impact that has on a woman's body for riding, for the physical work that's often needed to work within the industry. So there is work on menopause, and it's actually Menopause Awareness Month this month. And I think last Friday was Menopause Awareness Day. So there's a big societal pull as well. This has moved from being a completely taboo subject very, very recently into something that everybody's talking about, along with menstrual health and the place that has the part that plays in the workplace. So our next move for Racing Home is to try and move on with getting together a group of women to start a proper research project and look at how this impacts on a day-to-day basis on women's lives, and then basically what we can do about it, because knowledge is real power with these sorts of things, and often it takes very small adjustments within the workplace, maybe allowing someone to work from home occasionally, or just an extra piece of kit or something like that can make all the difference, and keep somebody in the workplace. And one of the big issues, all of the research so far around menopause, is that women don't want to talk about it, don't want to admit to their employer that's why they're off. So they'll give other reasons, and quite a number of the research that has been done, just finally, shows that a significant number of women, because of menopausal symptoms, have either turned down promotion or not gone for promotion, or have gone part-time, or have actually left, because juggling the two are so difficult. So it's really important now that we think about that part of the workforce, because it really affects returners and can do something about keeping women in the workforce much longer for the sport.
Well, thank you, Kate. Looking forward to seeing that research. Lyndon, with your experience then at the BHA and within other sports, what support do you feel there could be to better retain the workforce and retention and the issues within horse racing?
Yeah, I think Kate touched on some of those in terms of the work around greater access to flexible working. I think that the pilot project that she mentioned will be a huge step forward, because it gives employers something tangible to look at and prove that it can work. I know there are trials that have happened in other countries, in America and Australia, around that have been successful, but that's not necessarily a widespread practice. So I think that will be really helpful to helping retain people within the workforce. And I also think some of the work that will happen as part of that sort of broader people strategy activity around culture, values, inclusion, I think will be really important too. There's already an industry-wide code of conduct around behaviour, but it's really, I suppose, making sure that messaging is reaching all corners of the industry. So I think that type of activity will be really crucial to start bringing employers along on the journey, I guess, to making working in racing a more equitable space for everyone.
Thank you, Lyndon. But there's a question that's come in, and it's I'm gonna pose it to Ali, but if Lyndon and Kate have anything to say on it, then do let me know. The question is, in a sport where some women don't want to engage on gender equality conversations because they don't want to acknowledge that there are barriers, or don't actually feel that they've experienced barriers, and certainly don't want to talk publicly about it, how do you then advocate for change on the top table and with stakeholders when, as Ali said, there is no incentive to change because we already have women and men competing on equal terms? Lyndon, you might have some experience with that with your work with BHA, or Ali.
Yeah, happy to.
Go on, Lyndon, you go on.
To sort of jump in there, and the term equal terms, it's in inverted commas there, and I think that is an interesting one, because when you look at the data, particularly around retention that we talked about quite a lot, there's a suggestion there in that data that there are not equal terms, and particularly when you look at rider numbers in terms of men and women in those top categories, again, it would suggest that there's not equal terms. So it's a good phrase for the sport to use, but I would question that. And around that sort of top table, one of the things I'm incredibly passionate about is men's role in this, and being visible and vocal in conversations around flexible working, around parenting out loud, around advocating for changes to working patterns around periods and menopause. All of those things, I think, are things that everyone can do, irrespective of hierarchy or any form of seniority. But I do think that the equal terms bit is a bit of a bugbear of mine. I haven't really answered your question, but I thought I'd just get off my chest.
I'll come in as well. Yeah, it's a really good question, because what you're talking about is resistance to change, and that is, in sports that are doing well, Formula One is definitely doing well. There is a huge resistance to change from men and women at the top of the sport because things are going well. So I think the way in which you try and advocate for change in that kind of environment, my experience is that you try and reframe the narrative. So instead of saying, we're coming in here to change motorsport, we will say, we're coming in here to help you grow motorsport, because that is less scary and less hard to argue. It's harder to argue with that argument. And I think to the point we've had, from Kate about the power of research, one of the things we've really worked hard on is having unarguable facts about the opportunity that is being missed by either not investing in female athletes or not really caring about female fans. So Formula One, just very quickly, thanks in part to Drive to Survive and that the popularity of that, its female fan base has grown from like low 20s to it's almost 50-50, which is amazing in a very short period of time. And we researched and surveyed that fan base, and they said, we love this sport, we're new to it, but we hate that the grid is so non-diverse, both from a gender and an ethnicity perspective. And if the sport wants us to stick around and spend our money on this sport, which is obviously needed, we want to see it reflect us more. So I think reframing that narrative, you're missing out on money, is what we say to Formula One. Both fans who will buy more things and do more things, but also the sponsors that would come into the sport would be very different. I think it'd be a much more diverse sponsorship mix if there were female athletes. We've had Charlotte Tilbury, the makeup brand, come into F1 recently because there was a female racing series launched. Now, there's no way Charlotte Tilbury would be sponsoring Formula One otherwise. It just wouldn't happen. And so I think we try and make the case that, hey, this is a growth opportunity that you are missing, not this is the right thing to do. And, it's going to be a bit of a drain in your investment, but one day it will pay off. So for me, it's that slight reframing backed up by facts and stats.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, our time is up, I'm afraid. So I just want to ask the panel for one very short question, or one very short answer. If you had one wish for the future, what would it be in terms of the female agenda? And Ali, you're up there, so you're on the hot seat. So one wish for the future in terms of the female agenda.
Yeah, I think it would be that we're not talking about barriers in 10 years' time. We're only talking about opportunities.
That's great, like that. Lyndon?
I would like to see more support for women in racing and racing home to advance this agenda. If it's important, then I would like to see the industry put its money where its mouth is.
Yeah, I think Racing Home is doing a fantastic job, and let's hope that it continues that way. And Kate?
Mine's a very practical one. I think the one thing that came up time and again is the difficulties with juggling childcare. And this came from men and women right across. Society's clearly changing. There are plenty of men came to us and said, I want some time with my kids as well. How are we going to do this? And we've always found with the work that we've done at Brooks that if you change things and make them better for women, usually it makes things better for men as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Kate. And I just want to never hear the phrase, well, we've always done it that way, whatever it is.
Me too.
So absolutely. Thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to Kate, Lyndon, and to Ali Donnelly. You've been fabulous. Thank you very much to everyone who's listened. Just a reminder that there is going to be a survey that's going to pop up at the end if you're okay to fill that one in, and a reminder that please do encourage more females in racing to join Women in Racing membership from just £15 a year. So I'm sure that Lucy's going to just pop up to say goodbye, but thank you very much to all our panelists.
Thank you from me as well, everyone, and yeah, thanks for joining.